This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Oh, yeah. Dan gilu nale under the Pajidilio amdu Tashi Lhunpo, Tashi Lhunpo Choshung Sungya Mare. Cheni ne service tonachon. Jamshen Ngan Zundugi Sungnaria Lama Chebe Chendishwa. Chendish. Lama Chebe Chendi di Sungdan Jorba. Sungdan di Kong Bed der Sanga da Kanda Kadami. But dodges of a Chimbush Chache, Hallevet took you Yorba, Sondi Quada, the Zutet Shushi. Chazan Kongi. 다 성주중마다 저 토끼 쇼시에 된지 데이터는 도스한 리세좀 마도 라마치와 랑게 맹아 균디디 토끼여도 나버치는 것도 자상 뜻이 도매 그도 샤란데 다소 매베서지 리스토 다 간다 젊으치게 아니 년규 담은 증인데 세규로직 완석규직 다때네 송수직이야 유기 슝배기버직 스전에 규름해진이래 유기 슝바 스전에 규름해들이체 디 패치 자와디야 세규랑 임베서서 지는 싫어 생각하면 규定해지 다데네 야와서 받는 마치는 규定해지 원선이 단디 원선이 공차되어 자성가야 세규 공증가 시행한테 떠서야지 가서 그게 다른 시야서 좀 와야.
So, interestingly, even within the Giluk tradition, So,
야, 딱 무슨 의미도 그럼 모든 사람들이 이게 라마로사 통화 도지 창스네. 라마로사 디토글 통화, 디토글 도지 창. 도지 창기니 제 레저트 말이야. 이 팀에 매가신 델프마도 이네 결혼 도지 좀 들이야. 좀 필요해서 야 말이야. 그러는데.
So, even within the Giluk tradition, if you look at the writings of the other, earlier Giluk masters, the enthusiasm for this particular instruction doesn't seem to be that universal. For example, in the Amdo area, where the Labrang Tashikil Monastery is a very important kind of presence there, among the Tashiki masters, for example, the great Jamyang Shepa, who was very learned in the Vajrayana teachings and in all the other aspects of the Giluk teachings, he wrote a kind of an annotation on Lama Chopa Guru Yoga, which is very closely associated with this particular Mahamudra text. And if you look at his annotation on Lama Chopa text, of course, because of his vast experience and knowledge of the Vajrayana teachings, he's able to make comments on the important sections, but nowhere does he show any familiarity with the very unique lineage of this particular set of teachings. And similarly, for example, in Agusherab Gyatso's text, there is a kind of a somewhat critical comment made on a particular verse in the Lama Chopa, where you are offering a consort to your Guru Vajradhara. And because the Guru Vajradhara is visualized in the form of an ordained monk, a Tsongkhapa, and the Agusherab Gyatso says that it feels awkward to be offering a consort to a Guru Yoga who has been visualized in the form of an ordained monk. But of course, if you look at the instructions carefully, it is not to the ordained monk that you're offering, but you're offering to the Vajradhara, which is a Vajrayana Buddha, at the heart of that Guru, visualized in the form of Tsongkhapa. So to make the point, so you have the guru, guru in the form of Tsongkhapa. Inside his heart, at his heart is Buddha Shakyamuni, and at the Buddha's heart is Buddha Vajradhara, who is the Vajrayana Buddha. And of course, the consort is being offered to that form. But the point is that there doesn't, the enthusiasm for this instruction doesn't seem to be unanimous in the Gelug tradition.
Panchen Kundin Suina, Panchen Kundin Pache do Churchana.
Sorry, I forgot. So basically, within the Gelug tradition, there are oral lineages and oral transmissions, and there are three main ones. One is called the Se lineage of oral instructions, which comes from Jizun Sherab Singye. And then there is the Wensa lineage of oral instructions, or sometimes referred to as the ear-whispered tradition, and comes from Wensa Losang Choekyi. And then there is the... it comes from the younger brother of Kidrup Rinpoche, known as Pasu Choekyi Gyaltsen, and that lineage comes through Wensa Losang Choekyi and known as the Wensa ear-whispered lineage. And then there is the other instruction lineage that comes through in the form of the two tantric colleges, the Gyudu and Gyume. And the Lama Chopa and the Mahamudra lineage belongs to the Wensa lineage.
That did Kuru Ganza Sangunama Gyudebachigi, Dambachig Yosare. Then deep pleasure charging the ligament or Sambasto.
So there is also an instruction that came stamped through Kuru Ganzen Sangpo, which may be also associated with the particular Chakchen practice, Mahamudra practice. So, of course, I'm not completely certain.
General, at the Panchen Lama and the Panchen Lama, Panchen Bande Yishigi Yunzin Mendo, Panchen Imra, Panchen Bande Yunzin Zhongze was actually. Just a Yunzin Zhongze, and Narinas, Tashi Lhunpo, when say the give it to those and give it to Zane, Narinas, Nanzo Tashi Lhunpo, Nanzo Tashi Lhunpo, any Sejuk, any that the other Timmy Jang, the Jijiga, the Jijiga, don't look to the Yamarato Tanjava, or the Yamarato Dunzane, look, say you were in a look jiggy, Zanga Chinjil said Chenny, Zanga Goni Chinotri. Look jiglia, Zanga gave you some denture, Ninishinji Sonum last, Chenny. Nimbu Choda la Chene, Seneda, Yamarato Digi, Zolch. Then Pozarana Yabatala, Megazaya Satanama Chenny, and Ninishinji Sonum la, Chenny. The Unshi Kaza. Other that I would undergo to Kadao to Senny, look near the Shisumidani. Just a Marina, and the Wednesday. Gunzimba Namgi, and say you can do it, the Kapachimbu, Jagger, Kapachimbu Jagger, that Taja, Benjapande is Rang, Sung Leda, say you can the Sungi, Dangash, send some steps to her. So did it do? So the Benjapande is pushing out and becoming the Sung, you say. She's an any say you have looked at the march letting it.
So in fact, historically, it was the Tashi Lhunpo Monastery that used to be the main center for the Wensa ear-whispered lineage. And there is an interesting remark made by one of the senior monks there, Yongzin Dongzewa. And he says that in the old days, this is in reference to a particular practice from the Yamantaka sadhana, and the way in which there are two ways of doing a very specific type of ritual. And Dongzewa said that in the old days, we were always very faithful to the Wensa approach to things. But now these days, Benjamin Panchen has brought the Segyu say it was Buddhist lineage approach, and since everybody seems to be doing this, let's follow that way as well. So this suggests that there was some qualms between, the kind of people who emphasize one approach versus the other.
Now, Dinda, Gende Goju Rinpoche, Chakjin Zawa Gyewe Shunglum, Konsangaba Chimbu, and Genden Chakjin Sen Sungshan Jigris, Goju said Gomaris.
In fact, with respect to the title, which is the main path of the conquerors, root stanzas on the Mahamudra according to the precious lineage of the sacred words of Geden masters. The word sacred words, lineage of the sacred words, can also be seen as a reference to Kaikyu, because the Tibetan word is the same, Kaikyu. So because of this, the fifth Dalai Lama said, why don't you just call it the Giluk Mahamudra?
Namu Mahamudra ya, Kunju Kuji Rangshi Chakyashi, Yemi Jute, Simki Tashi Yin, Chamber Tunze, Kapta Druveji, Dame Lame Shablo, Kuvendus. Shishitse, Duju Menga Jas, Shu Dune, Lebon Domze, Gende, Gujuba, Druzo Dama Banza Yaseki, Gasu Chakyasimbu, Tamba Ti, Shani, Zomba Tamchatche. Senda, Tashra Tuzumindu, Tatianda, Kunju Rangshi Chakyache Sade, that Mushiti Shamlia, Tamashu did the Chakyanlia near is. Duluk Chakyasamputa, Noluk Chakyasampu near is. Now, that and the dog Chujudi, Nigel Kevin on the channel. Kunju Chakyache Sade, Duluk want to Chevita, Chakyasamputi, Dungil Zigari. So the name to Zane, she's a gun Kava, and she's a gungi turned up Nilu. 전담배다 인루 아 누구 양다 좀 통해 뭐니 뭐니는 좀 보죠 선소는 신체니 다 간다 주제를 되어지고 저 간다 강이네 그 때는 저 인도잖아요 때는 따고 인도잖아요 때는 따고 뭐인배 라왕게 주어지 동에 신이디 시작을 켜대어 거다 저들의 인도 근육근육을 찾아주셨어 대대비 유동본이 되다 아니 심지 도지인 다 심지 도지인 세대다 질 있는 돈이 되별로 다 대난전에 아니 급수 봐봐 아니 뉴물 해지게 왜세 양은 대화침 비시 뉴메 왜세기 아니 어디 자기시 예민죄의 심지 도지인 스타디 분배 중이다 지금이나 ora penen medao chuni de chigbaredi ine da najobe community 되게 써야 돼. semla mi gozab신 일본이 버시도 있어요. 류에 마웬 세베스르도 디 주드나리 아래 심지 chuni 심지 대코나니 디 도고야 돼 개침불이 세네베 롱몽고 조용도 와. 주지 먹고 거용도 와. 그래서 디디도 전에 따디한다. 지 chuni를 켜버려 매나야. 최시 최전디 콘데 꾸지 제법이 인도잖아요. 최전 심지 춘이디 저 자도 되는 고미하선 거래. 사들이 인도 심지 춘이 점버던서 잡다 주베 제스 담엘라미셔로 그벤드 쓰네. 다 심지 돌치셔야디 라볼루베 심디디 그 미치고 말봐. 그 루부 쩐지 왕게 그게 가진 저대가 봐. 단 용을 해지지 왜세디 통마도 타마차와 인도잖아요. 심지 돌치했어. 뭐다 대 인성 대충이 대 점버던서 제다 라마리아 구샤 되찬제 되는 좀 담자. 주저 담아 반자 야세 송니 중 보수 체계 전쟁기 로마 에니 가서디 너도 들만 주진 쳐다지 다 되네 저와서 봐서는 마도 스튜디오 쇼요리 담아봐서 야세 손에 들으셔. 가수 찾아 첨부 담아티시.
So the text begins with a salutation which reads, "The great seal, all-pervading and the nature of all, indivisible from this is the ineffable expanse of Vajra mind, most supreme amongst realized ones, who reveals this naked to you, O peerless teacher, I pay homage," which is the verse number 1. And so when we speak about Mahamudra, or the great seal, there are Mahamudra according to the sutra teachings and Mahamudra according to the Vajrayana teachings. And this salutation is really a common salutation referring to both levels of understanding of Mahamudra. So in the case of, for example, there is a reference to all-pervading nature of the great seal. And from the sutra point of view, this refers to emptiness. And in the sutra context, Mahamudra, or the great seal, really is the teaching on emptiness. And the reason why it is referred to as all-pervasive is because the nature of everything is really emptiness. And nothing is outside the bounds of empty nature. And then here, the next indivisible from this is the ineffable expanse of Vajra mind. And Vajra mind here refers to kind of a more a Vajrayana understanding, because Vajra mind, Vajra, the term Vajra is sometimes has the connotation of indivisibility, or also a diamond-like quality. And so this diamond-like quality refers to the subtle mind, not to the gross levels of mind, which are much more occasional and accidental, whereas the subtle mind is always the ever-present. And this relates to the innate mind of clear light. And here the emphasis is really made on meditation on emptiness in relation to one's own mind. Generally, when we talk about emptiness, permeates everything. So one can talk about the emptiness of flowers and pots and so on. But because mind is, in a sense, the creator of your universe, the meditation on emptiness focused on mind is much more powerful. And in fact, in the Vajrayana teachings, for example, in Aryadeva's compendium of practices, he makes very important points about the importance of choosing the mind as the object of your meditation on emptiness. So that, because the mind is really the creator of your universe, so by focusing on the nature of mind and its emptiness, the impact is much greater. So in the salutation, Panchen Lama says that most supreme amongst realized ones, who reveals this nature of mind naked to you, peerless teacher, I pay homage. And in the next stanza, he explains, he makes a kind of a pledge to compose this text and give the instruction. And here he writes that I shall write here on Mahamudra according to the tradition of the supremely realized Dharma Vajra and his children, the upholders of the sacred lineage of Geden, who distilled the essence of the ocean of sutra and tantra instructions and transmit it endlessly.
Oh yeah. Dil jong jusumle 당부 땐다 태진라 주벽고도 중심칠 가슴 측선 모임 비 점도 심긴 nenden샤 다 투무공원으로 제니 점도 심기 nenden샤 심지 춘이 통하여 소사 집중 라드베 이견 문점 동산이 자샤 강망은 당에 주순산제 탐제다 예매자 라마라 닝네 선도 양야 차스 라면내죠 다 가다 집어잖아다 주지 내 얘기도 동사도 주차다 아니 소소베다 신라는 라마 인도잖아요 에너다 라면내죠 있는 난대자 송샤.
So then the text begins in stanza 3, where he says that this instruction has 3 parts: the preliminaries, the main, and the conclusion. And then he says that of these, since the first, the preliminary, is the gateway to the great vehicle and is central axle, so not just through mouth and mere words, but with emphasis, seek refuge and generate the mind. So this is the common preliminary practices by taking refuge in the three jewels and reaffirming the bodhicitta practice. And then in the next, he explains another kind of preliminary practices here, primarily the Guru Yoga practice. And he says, then to your root guru, who is inseparable from all the Buddhas of the three times, make repeated supplications from the heart. As for the since seeing the mind's true nature is dependent upon gathering accumulations and purifying defilements, proceed first with the 100,000 mantra. He's talking about preliminary practices here, and hundreds of repetition of confession of the downfalls, which is the confession sutra. And then to your root guru, who's inseparable from all the Buddhas of the three times, make repeated supplications from the heart.
다들 무시 차자 첨불라 시주 망도 도노야 동안 예 니스여스 치마 도지 류니라 내도 눈속 탑게래 중요 대신 외세데스 사라하다 로루조 나름 미디 작진디 중민권에 땜바이 라미 규디 영인인 저는 다디 내도 눈속 치마 도지 류니라 내도 눈속서 속도되게 가르치 땡기나 전다디 자신 양세 주면 알아요 미세케 숨해서 주지 계속은 돼 내도 눈속서 내 계속은 돼 다디 데 미션 세간의 개민도 또 고수 제베이나 저번 전부 어디 역에 아니 rigpa 람도 쳐야리야 저론 틀리 냠냐 고야 말이 라볼루르에 심 딩건도 교도 내가라 바나 묘무전 그 로슈 잡고 깨베 그돌라야 묘몬디 셰베런 시르바다 봐 자상가 셰베런 시 임의 인도자님 시 디다 셰바 참을로기 그 가서 우리 보기 자연 중국 먹고 외세는 좀 물어보다 안다 중어 로또 세티 임바 되게 계속서 자다도 신 외세레 녀도 아니 쳬바 나와 딜레야 아니 러신저 군도께 공회시바도 송원도 줄 독신단도 되게 하고 그래서 딜레 인도자네 파티뮤도 자네 러신저 군도 디디야 다 아니 나올 팀 쳬월 팀 녀도 팀 외세레 팀 저도 간다 셰베 직디디 천으로 쳐서 싸워르디 유명해 외세도 찾도가 자 딜레 인도자네 그러나 추 착바차네 착롬 차되면 내가 추유는 실내 다야요 말거다. 그러나 저 드린디 드린디 시바 타다라 아니 외세기 리셰 켜버려스. 드린디산에 조징기 다 리봉 모드 전이 뭐냐라 그게 라마도 라마 그게 덴지 좀 되버지다. 덴지기 이메이나 아니 리봉 모드 그 타네 아니 모지 트레이나 셰바 군라 베디티 숨으리 딘루 numchos 띠긴 줄라 그차 탐절라 띠기 num기 첩되어레스 딘루 num적수로 셰바 타다라 외세게 이렇게 켜여레스 딘데 인도산에 리보 콤베네콜이야 페널다 페널 뉴모로 증거도 주변 내걸이네 뉴몽기 페널 차당기 그게 진단으로 이동하다 명언전에 거든 되지기든 진단을 지게 알아봐. 딘 진단기 레처로 그거가 봐 로마탄체. 그 그런 진단기 그 제소 로 미동하체네 로코랑기 아다 차단 그 로코랑기 어세 정신 딱해 가나 로도 스파 네트워크 전부 있나 자 이니 갈리갈리야 그 지금 차단 그 르고 말고 꼭 갈리갈리 수충자지다 도스네 셰바 간다 간이네 거래 릭셔 코라 간다 또 셰바 정수스다 냐라 리버 젠르피 데바 디토라 리베 정수 심니 데바이나 에네 루브르베 차디리 갈레 파타 팀드라지 저자 도스체니 솔룬 티글리 곰니 왜세 쳐도 칠먹어봐 라볼루베 셰바 코레人心 랑우트버치네 되게 간리야 로 정수 투지 정수 신투지 중이나 아니 갈리갈리야 라벨로스 라벨 셰바지 방가제 아니 뉴메 셰바 먼저 좋다지 그래서 진짜 인도 들 자주 맨로 sometimes 치마 도지 류니라 내도 눈소 신 소르체 소르디 송다스 소르디 dan스케도 지도게 다디안다 난조 저르무치 사운드베 기름 난조 더림 디인데바 디 결혼 산자주 자셔버티 나로리아 치워치고 남지 그도 된 데시디 겨야래 아니 룽기 난조를 때네 왜서 쳐도자 지다 미도고 좀 코네 때네 왜서 쳐도자 니요레스 루루 yapseki 룽기 난조를 때네 왜서 쳐도래 곰 님모만 남기스 다 그주리 님은 잘라 곰 님모만 남기 룽 나절라 또 먹어봐 아니 가지고 그게 매도고 경에 관내 되네 다한테 자진 그변한다 디 가서 식순내데 나리야 해대와라 상태를 해야 돼 그냥 섬 해대 줘야 돼 단지 믿고 싶지 당 아주 조심 공부에서 뭔가 저게 쌤 해도 저거 좀 조심 공부에서도 와요. 근데 나도 싶지. 대대야 근데나. 다 뭐네잖아. 아주 되게 시야들이 동력이 따와 따라 밤니 중년 중년으로 좀 창제니 쌤 내로 야오시시. 쌤 창소해야 돼. 아도 군다름 지기 토론나들이 나 차조 세동 지미지 종 수전 따르 매장 아니 통전마동 대한장 수수 모두 세리점 뇽러 땡동 롬창싱 다디야 토론되는 것도 와 다디 토론되기 다가 심비는 경영하거든 다디 경기 매배다 가서 그랬지 드셔고 봐 다디 인도산에 안 드셔야돼 심 중년으로 좀 창출자네 달래만 이셔내면 니네만 주면 오복하는 껴나면서 때다 예지 예바 때문에 매심에 껴하면 신 송샤다 된대가 터네 중년으로 창초거를 마도 수쟁 종는신 매버지 심 칸에 총어래 강내 총어래 강도 내열래 강도 좋아했으니 수쟁은 지금 삼단에 뒤심지신이 통 말봐 저자가 우면슝의 송샤베 판예베스 팬유진에게 쌤디 딱잖아 경가 내서 저한테 신가셔야 된래게다 된도 주문도 오시 주문때 고와 예배 땡네 딱 무시 공부 그도라 돈이 잡아시다 미치고 그라 낭동 주문때 리베 못 쳐야 되거다 아다 해대 와서 상탈리서 고민해야 돼 되는데 디 맨로 some chance 시 소제 중고 차전에 로단도스 메다요르디 디 솔론체를 이렇게 고모래 아니 다 대상소들은 참으로 공부해 이니 계도다 지다 풀보다 지도 개바 마요 롱언요 어디 참으로 계속 공부 가서 솔론체를 고모했다 거다 근데 맨로 some chance 내도 눈소 특별 레스 춤에 대신 회사에서 다르죠.
So then in the main practice, we read from stanza 6 when he writes, "As for the main practice of the Great Seal, Mahamudra, though there seem numerous perspectives, due to the division of Sutra and Tantra, there are two. So the Sutra Mahamudra and Tantra Mahamudra. And the latter refers to the clear light, so this is the Tantric Mahamudra. The latter refers to the clear light that arises from such skillful means as pinpointing the vital points of the body. So this refers to the practice of the energy and drops and channels and so on. So Panchen Lama in this text, he speaks about such skillful practices as, giving this as an example, suggesting that there are other means of, arriving at the experience of Mahamudra. So although he does not elaborate on this, even his own auto-commentary, one understanding would be perhaps he's referring here to other approaches such as that of the Dzogchen practice. Because in the Dzogchen practice of rigpa awareness, doesn't rely on the yoga of the channels and the winds and the drops. Rather, what it does is that it understands that, even when you are experiencing an afflicted state, such as an emotion like an attachment, you are still within the experience of consciousness. And all consciousness are permeated by the nature of rigpa awareness. They all share the clear light nature. And the analogy, the metaphor that is used is just as every part of the sesame seed is permeated by oil, in the same manner, every mental experience is permeated by the rigpa or the clear light nature. So the approach in the Dzogchen practice is not to use other means such as the yoga of wind and energy and channel to withdraw the grosser levels of consciousness to gradually arrive at a subtle clear light mind, but rather to use the very occasion of ordinary mind itself, such as in afflicted states, and find a way of not being drawn by the afflicted aspects of that experience, such as, for example, if you have an attachment, the attachment will have an object draws your attention. So when you experience attachment, instead of being drawn by the afflicted dimension of that experience, you try to recognize the clear light, the luminous nature of the experience itself. First, you have to recognize that, and once you have recognized it, then you try to stay within that, so that you remain, regardless of whatever ordinary states of mind arises, you recognize them and then stay within its essential nature and not to be drawn by the afflicted kind of more extraneous kind of outward-looking aspects of that experience. And in this way, gradually, the afflicted states and the grosser levels of mental processes come to dissolve, and then you experience the clear light. So this is a kind of a different approach. And in fact, in Kirum Nosang Gyatso's commentary on one of Tsongkhapa's sadhana practice of Guhya Samaja, called Nenjo Thapa Rimba, the stages of the purification of the yoga, here Kirum Nosang Gyatso actually explains that there are two primary means by which the clear light, the innate nature of mind, the clear light can be awakened. One is through the yoga of winds and energy and channels, and the other one, then he says, that is the approach of cultivating non-conceptual states of mind. It's the approach of non-conceptuality. And here he explicitly says that, for example, the meditation instructions according to the early translation school, the Nyingmapas, will bring that approach. So he explicitly identifies these two different approaches for affecting the experience of the innate clear light mind. So, for example, in the Dzogchen practice, when you recognize that the clear light aspects of the the mental experience, then you remain in a state of, how do you translate hedewa? Like a kind of a wonder, a sense of wonder, a sense of amazement, and you stay in that state, and then you try to remain within that state. But even here, His Holiness was making the point that sometimes these days people refer to Dzogchen meditation as simply being this, just remaining in the state of, just having this state of wonder. But this is, not adequate because this presupposes that you have actually gone through the deeper reflection on the understanding of emptiness. Even the Dzogchen instructions will explain that the rigpa practice must be preceded by inquiring into the movement of the mind, where they arise, from where do they arise, where do they dissolve into, how does it abide. And this is, this implies that the Dzogchen meditator already must have some grounding in a deeper understanding of emptiness, as explained in the great works of Nagarjuna. So sometimes what happens is that people, even when they do this inquiry into the arising and disappearing of the mind, they use the kind of the archetype of a material object and try to see if the mind is like a material object. But that's very gross, that's very coarse. What needs to be done is to really delve deeply into the actual emptiness of the mind. I mean, this is why Kongdang Rinpoche, in one of his writings, raises critical questions about, not getting it right in the Dzogchen context. If you simply limit your inquiry on the arising and disappearance of mind on the model of some kind of, coarse material object, and try to see if it is like the material object, and then concluding into some kind of emptiness, that really doesn't take you to the actual understanding. So this sense of wonder, and simply recognizing that clear-light aspect really presupposes that you have a deeper understanding of emptiness.
Yeah. 다디네 뭐뭐 겐지 두숨기 뭐든 돈이 공주대 딜레션베 타벨라 매지 포조루루송 딘 대의 공부신 차제신부 취보도 심경고도 제베서 윤전라면 숨시 쩨세네 다디네 마
So then, he goes on to write that, and this is the great seal of Saraha, Nagarjuna, Naropa, and Maitripa. It is the innermost essence of unexcelled Tantra, as revealed in the cycle of realization and of essence. And then he says that the former, which is the sutra, Mahamudra, refers to the mode of meditating on emptiness, as taught explicitly in the extensive, the medium, and the short, which is referring to the perfection of wisdom teachings. There is no door to liberation path apart from this, so states the excellent noble Nagarjuna. And he says that I shall transmit here a guide to the great seal, Mahamudra. I shall expound here the mode of introducing the mind's nature in perfect accordance with the words of the lineage masters.
현실계조 고마 난된 로님 이기시 시지 주 조신당 우메더리 라소바 소수로 민도 많아야 내든 우리 라케시 냠유진 예내저베 자나 고보치도 봐. 대는 어레 다들 되게 로시아디들이 그 야오 수상 담에는 어디디 지 소소소리야 지 섭케로 지 여등에 아니 섭케 여바 인도베 직직 파소도 시야 로시아 판도에 돼 봐. 어떤 시시야
Then he writes that, when it comes to the practice instructions, there are many different instructions, and he lists them. The yoga of innate nature, and the amulet box, the fivefold, fusion of taste, the four letters, the pacification, cutting off practice, and the great perfection, the guide to the middle way view, and so on. And then he says that though there are such numerous appellations, when examined by an experienced yogi, learned in the definitive scriptures and reasoning, their intentions converge on the same point. So here, as explained before, each of these different instructions listed here, they have their own uniqueness. they have their own profound approaches. But if you're able to kind of, expose yourself to all of them and have understanding, then in your own practice, you can enrich one practice by bringing from different aspects, and in this way, really, make your practice more comprehensive.
다들 삼대대 띠불라 륜에 둔다 댄샤라 룽루구주 다도세 리버등이 레버치 남다 게 셈템베 잠루심기 원도 땅 손놈나면 조금 다 뢰버지 이면에 라마초트야 라주트는 이면 어때야 다냠 뒤버잖아 아주 저부치기 나로 추루기 지 이지숨된다 아니 르가 단서 니게 라면은 저티 무슨 춘주 라면은 저다 그러셔 또 상고야지 저자가 춘주 라면은 저 되니 뒤에는 라마 라마 팀 인 차신 겁니다 다단적도
So then he writes that, so of the two approaches, seeking meditation on the basis of the view and seeking the view on the basis of meditation, here it is in accordance with the latter. And then he explains how to, actually engage in the instruction. On a meditation seat, most comfortable, ensuring the adoption of the sevenfold body posture, dispel the impure winds through the 9 rounds of breathing exercise, and distinguish clearly the fresh and scoria of awareness, endowed with a perfect virtuous state of mind, set the precedence of seeking refuge in mind generation, and undertake the profound path of Guru Yoga, then having performed fervent supplications 100 times and so on, dissolve the Guru into you. So as a preliminary practice is, if time permitting, then you can do the Guru Puja, Guru Yoga, which is associated with this particular lineage. And but if not, then you can also do shorter, for example, like 6 sessions Guru Yoga. For example, Tsongkhapa in his instruction for the 6 yogas of Naropa text, and also in the 5 stages in one sitting, which is the Gohasamaja completion stage practice. In both of these cases, it is explained that you can use the 6 sessions Guru Yoga practice as your basis and then do the main instruction. So one can do a shorter Guru Yoga practice as well.
네. 슈라선들 자서서 전혀 라마랑라 팀. 다 건단디. 나와 펜뷰랑 달라스. 지금 그게 무규식 잡고 쟁이. 전제 지금 나한테야 지금 무규식 잡고 지금 가서 그게. 그래다 지금 백가주 숨지로 지금 용대 그거. 전제 지금 전제가 나와 펜뷰랑 달라스. 레도라서 남도 제주 가면 미치고 위험이 중생 냠벌 쇼. 양 냠벌 샤베 샤단데 게다 니로 더부이 이지가고 마인바 마인 전배 장수 속스. 다스셈 지게 그게 지 가서 봐. 지 섬규 전유게 매대게 게대서 니 고대서 내 매매셔. 가다 시바페 총도에 삼벌 대야지. 다 미딘디 치료 미딘 가다지 띵인지 숙년신 지기다 가다 지난 게다 가다지 미딘지 삼다 매매체 코라 세섬 직섬 시바 코라 가다 삼다 미하리 디 많이 첨배 장수 속 교르비 시신도스 다셈 rigzam, sesam, nyongzam da 또 참배의 심부전이 텔레 현도 다 심파직 촘트디디 시신기 리버전이 다 도든 rigse 몰라스 맞는 유세 rig스는 유기 나바직 사야 디 녀야간에 유기 나바 때도기 디 녀야간에다 디르바 사직 세 다디 유간 파선 마단체 제지 시바 코레 모지 영상 대가간 다디 디리샤 제 그냥 공연시 뜻도 공연시보다 책임도 딱 한다 저기 대배 저기 봐 참바 냠용으로 지금 잔대야 되디 쳇는 식가 다 마음을 디신 디마시 산데 삼고에 결모주체 달로 다가가 다다야다 지 사슴지도 다가가 또 슬로 샤바이나 호트하라 동상실로 셔도 능주 공연 시에 슈그루티기 이루데마 또 급대에서 와. 다 공연 시버디디 봐 가서래. 레미줄 니미줄 봐샤. 다가는 신기 이류 관계 대배직 잠바다 마음바의 운수야 디디에 봐. 칠리는 까니운데 제 동상으로 샤시도. 다 동상으로 샤데디 윤도서 생투나. 에네 간성선에 즉 냥섬 직섬지기 냥지도 슬랭이지 지금 못 쳐야지 용돼야지 어디 뒤순 거래 직진세가 몰라 심기쯤도 찌지 됐어.
So then the text reads that, having done this Guru Yoga practice and you feel deeply moved by the Guru Yoga practice, and then whilst in this state of diverse perceptions, I mean here he's referring to a sense of sadness, but also a sense of joy. So there's a kind of a mixed emotions that you experience as a result of doing the Guru Yoga practice. So whilst in that state of mind, without any contrivance whatsoever, such as with thoughts of hope, doubts, and so on, place your mind for a while in equipoise. So, in other words, once you have done the preliminary practices, felt deeply moved, and within that state, then you should be in a state of mind where you don't allow your mind to be distracted by all sorts of conceptual projections, such as by hopes and fears and so on, and then remain in that state of equipoise. And then the way to do this is not simply being a state of a completely dull nothingness, but you need to have an alert state of mind. So then he explains that unlike the cessation of mental activity, such as in fainting or falling into sleep, set up the watch post of unwavering mindfulness. So you need to be alert, so that it's not a dull state of mind, and also you need to have this vigilance or awareness, so that your mindfulness is not lost. So you need to apply both mindfulness as well as this introspective awareness. Now, when you do this, you're not really doing this in relation to any external object of the mind. You're doing it in relation, focused on the mind itself. And generally, our mind is so busy, always kind of chasing after sensory experiences or thoughts and emotions that are led by our sensory experience. So what is needed is to be able to withdraw from this kind of externally focused activity, mental activity, and be more inwardly focused and take mind as the object of that experience. And here, initially, it is difficult. So what you need is to find a way of, first of all, switching off the sensory modalities. So if you're not consciously focusing on something external, then the sensory modalities are at least kind of silenced a bit. And then you have the mental activity. And the mental activity is generally, it's almost colored by the sensory modalities, so that everything has this kind of external focus. So what is needed is to really find a way of not being driven by thoughts projected into the past, whether it's memory or some kind of events that has happened, or projecting your mind into the future, driven by hopes and fears and anticipation, and try to remain within the present experience. So when you do that, because our own normal mental experience is so driven by sensory experiences or past and future, when you try to stay in the present, initially what you experience is kind of almost nothingness, kind of an absence. And if you are able to remain there, gradually the sort of the sheer subjectivity of the experience of mind the experiential part of that can become more manifest. So the pure quality of knowing and pure quality of being aware and pure quality of having that subjective experience will come to become more manifest, and then you remain focused on that. So this is what is being explained here. So it says that towards the nature of knowing and luminosity, channel all your focus and nakedly observe it, alternatively, like a skilled swordsman, swiftly cut conceptualization as they arise.
This one. So that day, correspond 심기 좀 제기 되어서 돼. 다지네 남도 강도 강계와 대전진인 의신샤 양의 레고를 캔신도 남도 지기 배배주 제트를 내버 대에서 전부 마셔 흘길래 심기 좀 흘길래 심지 줘서 전하다 세상 생양 지게도 주부 준비 심리는 런을 저 저점에 제송과 따라 제송받을 마인을 남도 관계 오라 대체 랑에 동서 차 대신 내세요 딱 봤나 뭐지 동서 시교와 통원 내준 제버시 자신 남도 지지장 민국 교 무엇인발 제대 대응 오라 저번经济 차준이 풀에 빼서 송보인 지도승리 풀에 저러니 초능권의 라야 term 신 시버시 장발래 냠상고 관계자 뭐지 당시 싸워다 수전 강도와 뭐주버 동산 나것도보다 지연차에 시교 제대로 심지 춘이니 무슨 하게 통매장 디시 손시 단도매 강산 재미 속벌 저 린상제 발상서对배 당과 인도시 당산 강리 검증과 폐절 공부 지기 줘 어디 디안도 심지 춘이 써야지 당연히 말해 그냥 다디 단다디 폐지 적신기 흉나라 책시 게다 검백도 인디 줄룩사디 줄룩숨사죠래 다디 폐지 다라르샤 냐라 심다 미팅으로 그라 심사좀 직sam티도 스타가로 많이 버찬이베 참배 심버제도 스테데도 아니 남도 교어든 잠만도 연백도리야 남도 멋이와 상게 다 남도 연구도와 상바 상게 그 남도도 봐야 의미로 반로돼야지 단디 응은지기 민모시면 나신 그 남도 전줘야지 단디 남도 지기도와 상바지 전부다가 양권 남도 쇼고다 되게 남도 상황도 민동원 제삼바지 드무식 좀 깨요보다 다때네 아니 다디 남도 랑오시고 응은지긴 자오차바 난신세 남도 줄룩직 다 되네고 남도 깨면 그돌이야 지금 남도리야 대상기 벽에 지금 가서 벽에 토나로 마시면서 그렇지 제유는 남도 거라 준두 거라 죽은도 거라 랑조를 심는 시전이 남도 랑초가서지 되네 로이 그게 세리 세좀 직섬 대강을 내야기 유로고 거를 냠용을 전부 연배 그돌래 이네 남도 충수르면 남도기 생 드레풍 모셔 콜이야 남도 그게 패닉하게 되면돼야지 강도는 꿈을 쉬어도 없어 강보 동벌이야 꿈을 내베이네 꿈을 둬야요 말이 가면은 쉬어야 가게요 말이죠 듣는시 리베 모로 못처님 되게 가는 정수 신대야 그러지 관배 내가올라 남도 무슨 충분히네 각 캐패는 되듯이 용돼야지 다지 주로 무슨 배가 내거래 배지 디레셔 단다 가지고 그러셔 다지 쇼고데 제대로 윤으로 신의 바 공연도 근데 심지 춘이니 무슨 하게 통매장사다 춘이디 주주요 말에 동번이 춘이 단돈 때문에 춘이도 쓰고 말에 난다디 근접의 심지 다 대코는 있을 쪽으로 와. 다 세서 직접 다 되게 간다 최신 군주비 중이 다 가져다 군주비 다 인루지. 다 디스트리뷰. 다 디슈고데 대답 몇개 준진이 당불 내제 심진 당불 내제 심내봐. 심게 never 주베 매중 특별하다. 심기 군주 모두주 인시셔지 견자마. 어다 되게니 대상기다 심지 뭐 통송 삼바지기 단 디니 덴징기 녀부 지그리 삼바천 침베이나 논주리스.
So we now read from stanza 17, the last two from the last two stanzas, lines. He writes, alternatively, like a skilled swordsman, swiftly cut conceptualizations as they arise. And when you abide at the end of such cutting off the conceptualizations, lose not your mindfulness, but let go with ease. Channel your attention, but let go with ease. There is the locus to place your mind. Also, it has been stated elsewhere, the mind that is bound in its own entanglement, when released, it's freed, there is no doubt. So, as stated in these, let go without distraction. Whatever conceptualizations arises, if you observe their nature, they dissolve and a total absence arises. Likewise, if you probe them, even when they abide, they are unobstructed, empty, and vividly luminous. Seeing this is called fusion of abiding and movement or mobility of the mind. So whatever conceptualizations may arise, do not stop them, but recognize their movement and place your mind unwaveringly upon them. And they are like the birds trapped on a ship that flies off, just as the raven that takes off from a ship flies to all directions but lands back on the same ship. By pursuing your meditation in this manner, nothing obscures the nature of your equipoise, a meditative state which will be clear and vivid. Since thoughts do not exist in any materiality, they will appear space-like as total absence and as anything. Though you see the mind's true nature more forcefully than seeing it with direct perception, there is nothing to grasp at this and demonstrate it or show it. So whatever appears, leave them freely with no grasping. This is the quintessential instruction to grab Buddhahood with one's bare hands, so claim most meditators of the snow mountain region, that's Tibet, with uniformity in their understanding today. So in these stanzas, essentially what Panchen Lama is explaining is a method of meditation which is very similar to, in the Dzogchen practice, known as three kinds of freeing the mind. And freeing, release, three kinds of release. And here, for example, when you engage in meditation and observe your mind, and as thoughts and thought processes and conceptualizations arise, one is to simply note their appearance and recognize them and then let go. And this, in this way, you're not reinforcing them, but you're simply acknowledging their arising. And this is actually likened to someone who acknowledges a person that you know. When you meet the person, you acknowledge and then move on. So this is one way of dealing with the conceptualization as they arise, by simply noting their appearance and occurrence, but not reinforcing them. Then as you become more familiar with the practice, then the second one is to really, as the conceptualization arises, although you observe their arising, you simply don't pay attention to them. So this is, in fact, likened to, and then when you don't give them the fuel, they sort of dissolve by themselves. And the metaphor used here is, if you catch a snake and tie a knot, the snake is able to unravel by itself. So in the same manner, the energy of the thought processes, if you don't reinforce them and don't pay too much attention, then they sort of go away, they dissolve. So this is the second level. And the third is to, and all of this is done by simply staying within the rigpa awareness in this luminous, clear-light nature of mind and, sustaining that part of the nature of mind. As you become more advanced, then you will get to a point where, whatever thoughts arises and emotions arises, they simply just don't have any impact. So, they no longer have any impact and influence on they don't have that kind of, the force they normally would have. So they can neither harm nor help you. So in that state, then it is like, then this is the metaphor used here is being robbed, but when you have nothing in the house, like an empty house being robbed, because there is nothing to lose there. So this is a kind of and so in this way, you get to a point where you have an experience and realization of the nature of mind. But this should not be confused with thinking this to be the ultimate nature of mind, which is the emptiness of mind. And here, Panchen Lama Losang Choekyi Gyaltsen says that though this may be so, he says that those others may refer to this as being the ultimate nature of mind. He says that though this may be so, this method is an excellent means of cultivating mental abiding by practitioners on the beginner's stage and a way to introduce mind's conventional nature. So it's not really still the ultimate nature. It's not really still the understanding of the emptiness of mind, but it is in a conventional nature of mind. And he says that this is so, I, Choekyi Gyaltsen, assert. And now as for how to effect introduction to the true nature of the mind, which he is referring to the ultimate nature of mind, I shall present here the oral instructions.
Oh yeah, that is good. Tan simple chunila, motor chida chaya chu, sanje namdi ishikun, mumin zibe chusune, dalu mobe museve, zawelame shatungu. Ngaki nyamsha nganile, 마요 당배 출난도 지전이 좀 죽었다 참여 시에 고법이 기부는 신사고다 파고루로 좀 이 기부섬이 주머니 매매로만 나가면 남시면 꾸면은 달래시는 기부강 기부금도 뇌배시 양다만 시다고 지식한데는 늦지 않다 이min 송부 시신사와는 냠샤 냠벌 조견소 뒤에서야 많이 봐 제시 예미 지지 나고 때문에 냠샤 좀 양은 냠벌 샤바가 수수 모두 동상에 뒤면 나서 차신조 강면 세신 리베균 차반 매벌 주고 있음对面 낭신 지버이 신용 공부 시월래 교도 초시 자원에 처음마서 신도 준 시수 론더 리베이 능수다도 모주베 나도 지지냐 버는 줘 너나 다게 계획신 전도 준비 참제지 산지 시생안에 강산 남도 점으로 용리는 전점 춘이 시하나对面 차 샤병아도 리베 쉬고를 지지냐 버는 줘 에마고 시수 대신 담배장 동백안도 리베 동으로 자 다와로 토도면 등류와 시에서 공부직도 내 신. 어다 네가 한다. 강사가 다음에 공부해야 돼. 뭐로서 디슈데 처리다며 공부해야 돼. 장심 다 돈이 공부해야지 송도가. 다 그거리 냐라 강사 그 덕시 터두디 시베 규들 봐. 자, 다시베 규스럽디 균제를 봐. 그 균제 대하던 가서디 가서지 타고 숨는 저 그도 삼다나. 현이 군지 중에서 규베 셈데스. 규等于도 딱 버쳐요. 동배 취지 다음에 바탕사. 딱고 삼담이나 대한 숙성부터가. 또 어다 릭섬 사점 더 시베 시베디 다 규기 때문에 시베디 규기 때문에 다 ngao 별로 찾네 다 되게 되네 다 나한테 떡이요 다 절 때는 나한테 떡이요 그래서 다게라 덕시 딘제기 다 시베 균디 그 균진 집에 인도잖아요 다디 내가 찾는 가슴을 마음을 찾는 중두래 다 다다 찾을지 봐봐봐 추주 karma 가서서 봐 되지면이나 다도니야면도 제가 강사 강도 답에 시 넘버 10에 규 거라 짠 이해하면 되지. 다 디슈션 게. 디스함스타인데 다 간사세지 연하다 디가는 셔주리. 딱 코치 많이 베거도 다를 때는 다디 그네 이해해야 돼. 차용도가. 현이 군주는 수집에 쌤도 주던이 떠서 동배 책이 담보다. run이 간사가 다도 집에 남도 자고 다도 자와 신 송샤다디 다 가서 우리 간사 강도 답에 시덕시 시와 권한 게 땡네 봐봐봤자니 짜는 조주에 매도 차이도 자네 다 될 때네 답에 다디 대자는 조주에 매도 시기 롤레고도.
So then in the text we read from the last two lines of verse 27, to the true nature of the mind, I shall present here the oral instructions of my root guru, who is the wisdom of all the Buddhas, assuming the form of a saffron-clad monk, who dispels the darkness of my mind. Whilst in the earlier meditative equipoise, just as in calm and clear water, like little fish flashes about without disturbing, with subtle awareness probe intelligently the nature of the person that is meditating. The savior Nobunaga himself said, quote, "A person is not earth nor water, he is not fire nor wind or the space, neither is he consciousness. If he is not any of these, where then is a person apart from these? Since person is a collection of the 6 elements, he is not ultimately real. Likewise, each element too is a collection, hence is not ultimately real." End of quote. So just as stated here, when searched for the meditative equipoise, he who is in equipoise and so on, of these not even an atom is to be found at that point, undistracted and in single-pointed, you should persist with a space-like equipoise. Alternatively, whilst in meditative equipoise, not in material forms but utterly void, unobstructed perceptions of diversity arise. This unceasing continuum of clearing and knowing awareness, the mind that is the uninterrupted engagement. As for the object of its apprehension, which is the perception and grasping of independence, Lord Shantideva states them to be false. That which are continuums and collections, they are like rosary, army, and so on, false. So through scriptures such as this and reasoning on this truth of nothing existing as perceived, place your mind in one-pointed equipoise. In brief, as my spiritual mentor, the all-knowing Sangye Yishi, who is in perfect accord with reality, states, and quote, "If you utterly recognize whatever thoughts arise as subjective, without dependence on anything else, the ultimate expanse of reality will dawn. Your awareness will enter the expanse thus dawned. Alas, I shall remain equipoise in this with single-pointedness." Likewise, Master Thampa Sangye, the Pathampa Sangye says, "Circle around the sphere of awareness whilst in emptiness. The view is unobstructed and unimpeded, O people of Tingri." The intentions of these statements converged on the same point. So in this particular text, having established the conventional nature of mind through the meditation practice we have done, he has explained earlier, then he goes on to explain the meditation on emptiness. And he begins by the meditation on the emptiness of the person, followed by emptiness of phenomena, where the focus is mind, which is one approach. However, one can also begin with taking the mind itself rather than the person to be the object of meditation on emptiness first. For example, in those who are familiar with the Heruka practice, will do the daily practice of what is called the 3 pure yogas, which is a daily practice, and where the meditation on emptiness is explained on the basis of the 3 syllables, Heruka. And the He stands for the emptiness, meditation on the emptiness of mind, which is ultimately the basis for the arising of the notion of person and self. And then Ru stands for the meditation on person. So that sequence can also be used in the Mahamudra practice, because when you look at the notion of any sense of personhood or self, ultimately it is based on some kind of physical and mental continuum. And even between the body and mind, the mental continuum, the mind that makes up the individual tends to be the more fundamental basis of the arising of sense of self. So when you take the mind itself, and if mind is a continuum, consciousness is a continuum, and anything that is a continuum, you can at least, conceptually, dissect in their temporal sequence, stages. So when you think about the past is no more. Past is no longer a reality. And when you think about the future is yet to be. So future is not real, future is yet to be. So the only thing that is real in terms of the nature of mind is the present. But however, if you look for the present mind, then when you keep teasing out what belongs to the past and what belongs to the future, actually there is nothing left. What is the present? You can go down to minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and so on. Then there is, you don't even find something real that is the true present mind. So if the mind itself is so insubstantial, it doesn't have that kind of solidity, then how can a notion of a person or a self that is based upon this, that is contingent upon the continuity of mind, can have any substantial reality? So in this way, you can actually begin the meditation on the nature of the mind first, and then move on to the meditation on person as well.
Emory 지터나리아 중미 속도 가르식스. 그동안 저장가 중주 숨시 중고르면은 다들 잘 많이 뵀지. 텔레 중에 중주기 에네 그는 얘기를 했어. 소원은 신체 다도 답에 덕식하라. 니아미도 전에 덜든 답에 다디 니트하면서 세우도.
A similar line of reasoning approach is also found in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, where he says that when you examine the elements, the subtle elements that together make up the material objects that we experience, if the elements themselves, when you probe their nature, cannot be found, in an ultimate sense, how can the gross object that are the products of these, elemental constituents can be real? So in the same manner, we can use our understanding of the insubstantial nature of mind to then arrive at the understanding of emptiness of the person.
Yeah. 다잖아. 제니 창신 공부를 중요한 남걸 지지고 두숨 계속 계속제 라미슈를 시고 대대로 공는 소주기 유도 나와 지상이야. 능수 심을 도시다. 내수 잡을 한게 차렸어. 자, 다디 계속 잘 알아 가지고 우모 측세 나리야. 아니 탄도셨을 때 추전 투나오 예미디. 다디 투고 다디는 가서 다디 키고도 와. 다 수순 제지 참아디 추별로래 뭐 추별로래스 로벨렌데기 친지 말고 로래스 다 나와저에 친지로게 녀든제스 송도가 다 친지로 인데면서 랑제 나왔다도 주유메 강 토용도 자상 왔다 된아주 탄도기 안데 셰스티 쉬우지 개침버려야지 편도 쉬우지도 시기 로벨렌데기 추순 세면 주주 직송단직 랑제 나와도 밀로에 셰바시샤 다티 우마베 캐란 그 말에서네 나와저버지 세셰기 나니티바 까유는서네 친절하게 녀든 삼례 지송도가 어다티 강성 문제 따위네 사이다 가사 말디 너는 랑선 라서 강강 나와 텐테니스 다 능수디 랑선 나임도 다 랑선 나와도 주변나 이 파자인도 전에 니고로다 텐딩네 니고 그 텐딩네 니야 믿으잖아 다 연이여 다 텐딩네 뭐주도 다 유진 탄예배 딱선마도 로스메도지 내용도 전진의 인도잖아 이게 다데 강산 남도 진보를 용르나 소야데 되리샤 다 안데디 다래 강강나의 텐딩네 뭔지 대대 내주디 네버지로 따도 좀 decision의 권대지 최는 추근 정식 찍도 줘. 되게 돈이야 파과래. 뭐부 찌기 따보강 되는 건지 따보셔. 찌기 뚱니 강인 봐. 되는 건지 뚱니인 제송. 대달 추니라 추신 양바를 샤고 뭘 예멜라서 권대지 저배 타자 재미기 텔레랑네 딱배치 민장 따유 잠시기 자시 된지 녀매버 민은 미주 춘다당 유모더고 망게차 된지 용도 전에 다 조조 땡중 땡시를 때네 다 담에 줘야 돼 직도 제다 즉 예매 경고사도 제기 동서 조송도가 또 직투제도 송용도 전에 다 가서 우리 동서 지고 뭐인 봐. 그人心이 매배 줄지를 때는 따고 봐서 주인도 전에 때는 따디 예배되고 시행인 거다. 그 여당고 술문에 봐 딱배 왕 예배 마도 팔문에 라왕 그 매대버지고 고용도 탄이 세세하게 느버디 땡지기 땡지를 슉슉슉 그래서 어디 들으셔. 다 전이데 근데 지기다 고를 내체 냠용으로 고를 내윤데 나의 동반비지 강산 남도 짐으로 용을 나왔으니까 가나도라 배는 내도만 떼주잖아요 지난주 뒤디 전쟁원에 예도지 로 나이고도 다 전쟁원에 예배 있는 자나 니고로 dim면도 아니 쇼도 dom디 다디 남도 딱 봐서면서 로이 거 봐서면서 아직도 로를 내윤잖아요 다 나와도 좀 해봤지 롤레고도 나 진짜 인도 어디 다 나는 동반 미디싱스 텐지 나와 텐지 루어메바 되기 동반 예바 되는 차이 뭐 봐. 진짜 인도 나는 동반 미디싱스 동반 나오면 거 봐. 지하메바 동반 말 봐. 뭐니기 나란도 팔문에 두고 팔문에 예바지 나왔는 시뒤 동반에 싸지 전도 여 말을 시sharing 거로. 그래서 진짜 인도 뒤에 나야 믿음이 유모도부터 거기면도 와. 그래서 진짜 인도 동반 나오면 거 봐. 동도 땡주 전집에 람사대지 무슨 줄었어. 어디 줄다. 되게 매봐. 망도 공부 로상 최이 견세 시샤디 계획 조금 시군이보다 제 남디 뉴도 제주 제 자제신 모두 지진데요. 니난 그 세계 년배 내가 다 통네 왼배지수도 장소가 주주기 동네 남들라 냠니 니고로 쳐봐 내주람 잡아 긴뒤견서다 한동 거주 싫어 생기니 아무네 양양 끝이 셴양 내주 차지 냠니 쳐버는데 랑가 너무 마부 거다 캐버 제주로 좀 탐지게 봐 여기서 버친 거 디니지 랑셀로 너무 저거 연구실도 신이 된주네 신라가 봐지 까도면 넘는다 담네 주도 시험만 타고 남들 뭐이 뭐 다들 가져보러 맞아 왜 찾아지면 동안 타로 두고 다들 이런 거 민수소 시티도 가져와게 명고 치 둘로 공부 치둘로 공부하스 배나 탐주 배가도 사제이시로 또 배치 탐지전 주기니 자주기 대다 켜라 대다 남라 계좌 상제선 누르시는 나야 무슨 지지시는 저거 둘이서 시선 같은 거에 쉐버 주버 쉐버 치로 또 뭐냐면 샤제 제원은 송데 다가 자라나 탐지 천시 쓰고 탐지 진시 쓰고 상제 시시기 시행은 내기 시행은 내기 바르사 샤제 제원은 송데 탐지 상제 시 바르기 람디 무슨도 투냐서 따외 신력이 기본 마냥신 탐지를 세모 수부 직수 중심 누주 탐배명아 집 봉어 로상 최지 견지기 근데 나버리 개베 링도 자와 오 어디 사서 finished.
So we read from stanza 39 where the author writes, in conclusion, whatever positive factors there may be from engaging in the practice of the Great Seal, together with the ocean of virtues of 3 times, dedicate these towards the great unexcelled enlightenment. Thus, having gained familiarity in this practice, whatever perceptions of object may arise, recognize in depth the manner of their perception, then their ultimate will appear stark naked. This is the essential point of recognizing whatever dawns in brief, whether it is your own mind and so on. Whatever may appear, do not grasp them as real, but ascertain their mode of being and always sustain this. Knowing this fuse into a single nature all phenomena of samsara and nirvana. So Aryadeva states that the reality of one thing is indeed the reality of all. He's referring to the emptiness nature. Therefore, while placing your mind perfectly upon the true nature of the mind, you will be free from the extremes of elaborations such as is and is not of samsara and nirvana. When you arise from this and examine the mere appellations and constructs, fictionalities and dependence arise spontaneously and without violence, like dreams, mirages, moon's reflection on water, or like illusions conjured by a magician. And here he's explaining the importance of understanding that there's been a big discussion between Nagarjuna's commentators such as Bhava Viveka on the one hand and Chandrakirti on the other, on whether ordinary perceptions are veridical in relation to their objects. And Bhava maintained that at least insofar as the reference to the objects that being perceived are concerned, there is some kind of a valid aspect to this, whereas Chandrakirti maintains that ordinary perception is shot through and through by projections of intrinsic existence of objects. Therefore, the ordinary perceptions are really, they have this diluted dimension to them because they project intrinsic existence to all of this. So what is being explained here is that when you understand an emptiness and meditate upon this, then later, arising out of this, when you relate to the world around you, for example, when I look at you, in our naive, pre-emptiness perspective, I will see all of you as being real, having some kind of independent existence in your own right, and each of you having discrete reality that are definable by yourself. But in the post-meditation on emptiness, when I look at you, then there will be a kind of an illusion-like quality to my perception. And I will recognize, on the one hand, you may seem so real, but on the other hand, I will know as a result of meditation on emptiness that there is a kind of an diluted dimension to that perception. So in this way, the author explains that in stanza 45, appearance will not obscure emptiness, and emptiness will not obstruct appearance, because emptiness is not just mere nothingness. And at that point, the excellent part of the perfect identity of emptiness and dependent origination will become manifest. And here, the author is explaining that among all the reasoning to arrive at the understanding of emptiness, the reasoning of dependent origination is the most supreme, because reasoning of dependent origination not only help dispel the projection of absoluteness to the things, but also it conveys the way in which things do exist, which is the pure dependence, the dependent nature. So in this way, emptiness and dependent origination will be understood as, meaning, having the same meaning. And then he writes that speaker of these is a renouncer who has heard a lot, someone called Losang Choekyi Gyaltsen. Through this virtue of composing this, may all beings swiftly become victorious through this path that is devoid of a second path to peace. Did it?
자상 오불을 주기 우마 자시로 다데 베도 다왔던 배숑다 개버를 들으셔 다왔던 배다 댄주그나데 다 건주나 몽구샤도 와다 아다本来저는 이제 실험이 붙는데 하게 부모가 보다 저 진짜 만나고 양다 보셔서 다오 신 송샤 직세 다데는 수도 먹고 동문이 수도 동문이 시험이 동문이 수시 뭐 있는 것이네 동니 시고로 쓰다 되게 다 동니 과대 배다 가서 되와 그래서 다 동니도 비숑기다 쏘도 저도 와다 아니 데 안다 가서 되면 돼 윤팔봐 윤팔마 아다 니치 시오지오도가 별로일세 다디 디믹처를 띠는 로족송디 디믹처를 대비나 시라게 좀 말해 다 로족이 디미 나셔버디 자시르게 다 자시르게 나 라진 수업중 예반한 게 라진 수업이 슉치시르샤 라진 수업에 난기에다 쇼로가 뉴티 댄지 저번 중앙가 되는 동반이 드셔 되는 때는 따와도 되니 오면 라면노 강시 댄중만 이거 청가해 보면 이거 뒤 동반이 청가해 보면 이거 송샤다디 다 자월들셔 노세니 니다를 삼다나 즉신에 즉 좋아져 가야 되다 진짜 용도잖아요但我东西多有什么的让人家基本的可是现在这里边是不真的我们东西多有现在知道个就上头是呢我把书记当然要给生说那些习惯的说那么了吧哪个身体大过上身体呀当然健康的内陆就我也毛等看到春节等不行应让什么人们nam으로 녀나가 저거 멀린도 맞으면 남게 내저거 시지야 뭐도 준부시 낭자고 규매 때문에 냥가와 나도 순준디 루미 있던데 해보니 식숙성부터 다得这么新的道理啊아니 나와서 초루 신도나 시스템에 이주지 시스템 루지 규매 때문에 되나다 되는 마냥 동리기 못도 신도 송샤다데 지도기 못도 왜냐면데
So, we're standing in a meditation on emptiness. Of course, the key texts are really the one by Nagarjuna, Fundamental Stanzas on the Middle Way, which is very extensive and elaborate teachings. And of course, the fundamental basis of these teachings are really the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. For example, in the Heart Sutra, there is a passage which talks about how all the 5 aggregates are devoid of intrinsic existence. There is also a meditation on the 4 aspects of emptiness, where he says that the form is emptiness, emptiness is form, there is no emptiness other than form, and there is no form other than emptiness. So where there is a relationship between emptiness and form are explained. And then, of course, the most important text really is Nagarjuna's Fundamental Stanzas on the Middle Way, which has 27 chapters. And of these, I would say the 24th chapter is probably the most important. And within that chapter, there are 2 stanzas. As, for example, in one of the stanzas, he says that, that which is dependently originated, that has been stated to be emptiness. And that, and that is dependently designated, and this is the true middle way. And then Nagarjuna goes on to say that there is nothing that is not dependently originated, and there is nothing that is not empty. If you reflect, if you use these passages on a daily basis, like the passage from Heart Sutra, and reflect upon them and meditate upon them, and think deeply on a day-to-day basis, then you will, after a while, get a feel for the teaching on emptiness. Get a kind of a taste, a glimpse of what it must feel like to realize emptiness. Of course, I'm not pretending that I have gained full realization of emptiness, but I can assure you that by making it a daily reflection, you can get a sense of what it must feel like. And then you begin to have a sort of a sense of what this illusion-like perspective on reality must feel like. For example, in the 7 Dalai Lama's poems, he talks about, he evokes this quality of the experience of perceiving everything as illusion-like. And then in his Guide to the View with 4 aspects of mindfulness, recollections, he actually refers to the perception as kind of a spectacle. You see the world as a kind of a spectacle. And in this way, daily reflection on emptiness can really have an impact.
Now, I think completed this was the lecture on Mahamudra, mainly about emptiness. Then, of course, due to a shortage of time, it's difficult to explain more detail. So now these, not just academic subject, but actually, you see, transform sort of our mind, our emotion. So I think unique about Buddhist sort of practices use human intelligence maximum way, through that way transform our emotion. Not through faith, but through analytical meditation. So that's very, very, I think, very, very helpful. So as a result, once we develop certain sort of the reality, because of the understanding about the reality, then all those, let's say, the distorted information, distorted, let's say, the emotion, which actually distorted, right? All then become weaker, 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 weaker. Result, our mental sort of state of peace increasing. And that also is immense help to develop altruism like that. So those people who really serious, then think more. Not sufficient just to listen one time, one occasion. No, think. Like our food. I already have very good food yesterday. Now today, no need food. You see, nobody said that. So you see, daily, we must sort of think these things, analyze, meditation. That's very important. So, thank you. So, so this. Okay. So this university made me professor, or honorary professor. So I think now professor's duty done. Thank you.
Your Holiness. Your Holiness and Professor, if I may ask your indulgence for 1 minute, I would like to speak on behalf of everyone gathered here, and indeed all who have shared the experience of your visit over the last few days, to thank you for teaching us so generously, for sharing the wisdom gained and deepened through many lives. You have stretched our hearts and have helped us expand our minds. You have helped us to know with greater intensity the luminous nature of every moment, and you have helped us to open ourselves to the warmth of compassion toward all beings. We know that you have other obligations this afternoon, but for most of us, this is farewell. We have a hard time saying goodbye to you, and so we look forward with hope and anticipation for your return as our teacher and professor whenever that is possible. Thank you so much for your grace and generous presence with us.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.